Hello all, I Nirmala Rawat welcome you to my YouTube channel Hari Sadhana 108. Thank you for listening. Thank you for giving your precious time to my YouTube channel. In the previous part, Soma narrated the role of Sita Ma in saving Sri Lakshman's life. Moving on to part 3, chapter 16. The day had slipped into early evening. We had been transported to another time and place, and as I came back to my normal consciousness, I looked around and saw that Soma's small hut was now filled with ascetics, some seated, some standing, some leaning in from the small window. They had come for nourishment of their bodies, but instead had received nourishment for their souls. Perhaps we should let you rest now. You have spoken all day, Soma, and we are very moved by what you have narrated, said Anasuya's mother. Soma shook her head. We are almost at the end. I will finish this part of the story of Mata's sacrifice. Both armies suffered great losses, and the damage to the wildlife and trees, the ocean life, and all living creatures had been great. It was now time for Sri Ram to face Ravan. Mata had not communicated to Sri Ram what she had seen about the true identity of Ravan for fear it would impede the battle. But Sri Ram intuitively knew. This made his task all the more difficult but also more urgent. He desperately needed to free his devotee from the great delusion that had overtaken him. During her time in Lanka, Mata had done her best to penetrate the deep recesses of Ravan's mind to try to awaken him. His mental ability, his acuity and discernment had weakened from many months of lack of sleep. Now it was Sri Ram's role to complete the process. In the end, it was Sri Ram's love that undid Ravan. As they battled through the day and night, Sri Ram saw the work Mata had done to unravel the intricate web of deception he had built. Mata described it like this. She was seated in meditation when she felt a tremendous burst of love rush over her in unending streams, like gushing fountains of the most refreshing waters. She sat there in great bliss. Eventually, she opened her eyes and saw waves of love rushing over everything, the trees, the plants, the guards around her. Then she realized it was coming from Sri Ram. Before he shot the final arrow, he stood for a moment, peering into Ravan's spirit and freeing him from his delusions. He sent that flood of love, of which he is the source, and then unleashed the final blow, cutting the roots of the 10 deadly traits that had held Ravan captive in illusion. As Ravan lay dying, the two of them spoke. Deeply humbled, Ravan asked Sri Ram if he could now return to his true home. Sri Ram sadly shook his head and said that although he had destroyed much of the karma Ravan had acquired, one more birth was needed for him to free himself fully. To ensure that his lust and pride were completely uprooted, his ego dissolved. That last effort had to be his to make. As Mata had foreseen, he would wander for millennia before that last birth. It would be a long time before he could gain acceptance back into the higher realms. Mata knew the moment the battle was over. At that exact time, the Amrit that had sustained her stopped flowing. As she began to emerge from meditation, the waves of love were replaced by a great fire that engulfed her body, the heat from her tapasya bursting into flames. It was thus that Sri Ram and the others found her seated in a bowl of fire. Lakshman called out in panic, thinking that she was being burnt alive. He started to run toward her, but Sri Ram stopped him. In amazement, he gazed at the sight and said, She is consuming all the impurities of this place and the effects of the war. This fire is the heat of her tapasya. Let it burn. The fire then withdrew back into her body and subsided. At that moment, the fire she had lit in Ayodhya went out. Soma said, I had been guarding it when it burst into a flame and then extinguished itself after 14 years of burning incessantly. Mata's flame went out. I knew then that it was either victory or death, she continued. In Lanka, after the flames had been absorbed into Mata's body, she felt the presence of Sri Ram and opened her eyes to behold him. In a moment of overwhelming joy, she rose to greet him. But she had not stood on her feet for days, and with the Amrit gone, her body suddenly experienced weakness from lack of food and water. As she tried to rise, the world began to spin around her, and Mata fell to the ground unconscious. Although Sri Ram also needed to be treated for his wounds and was depleted from the battle, he carried her into the palace and for days sat by her side, pouring drop of water into her mouth. Finally, she came back to consciousness, and just as promised, she took her first fruit from Mandodari's hand, telling her that now she had to heal the land by feeding the people. Before leaving Lanka, Mata and Mandodari cooked and arranged a feast for all the people of Lanka. Feeding people was Mata's way of expressing her love. And then, of course, as you may already know, her last act of Lanka was to go to the sacred Ashoka tree that had sheltered her and to touch her forehead to its root, paying homage to the great being who had been her companion and witness during that difficult year. Soma fell silent. Then, after a few minutes, she looked round and for the first time noticed all the ascetics gathered. She looked surprised. So many of you have come, and I have not fed you, she said quietly. Please forgive me. I will get your food ready. She started to rise, but one of the ascetics stopped her and said, Not tonight, Soma. Our bodies are satisfied, for you have fed our souls. My mother and I quietly took our leave, saying that we would return in the morning. Jai Shri Ram. Rereading this book literally transforms me into another time and space. Yes, it does feeds my soul too. This is the main reason I chose this book to read for my YouTube channel, thinking there must be many more souls like me, wanting to know more, wanting to feed our soul. If possible, do share your experience with me in the comment section. Thank you. Jai Shri Ram.